A stranger in the shadows. The winter sun hung low in the Chicago sky, casting long, cold shadows over the city. FBI agents Nathan Caldwell and Emma Harlow sat in their unmarked black SUV parked near an abandoned industrial district. The area, once bustling with factories, had decayed into a labyrinth of rusting warehouses and crumbling buildings. Their target, a dilapidated structure rumored to be a front for an international smuggling operation. Nathan adjusted his watch, his impatience palpable. "We've been sitting here for hours, Emma. Not a single sign of movement. Either this lead is a bust, or they're ghosts." Emma, ever the calm counterpoint to Nathan's restless energy, sipped her coffee and scanned the warehouse with binoculars. "Patience, Nathan. If this place is what we think it is, they won't risk being sloppy. We only need one slip-up." As the agents settled back into their surveillance, a movement caught Nathan's eye. Out from the alley emerged a scruffy, gray street dog. Its fur was patchy, its frame thin from hunger, but its eyes glimmered with an intelligence that seemed out of place. "Emma, look at this," Nathan said, pointing. "A stray." The dog didn't behave like most strays. It trotted directly toward the SUV, stopping a few feet away. Its eyes locked onto Nathan and Emma, its tail wagging cautiously. Then it barked, loud and urgent. "What the hell? Is it trying to get our attention?" Nathan asked. Emma leaned forward, intrigued. "Maybe it wants food." The dog barked again, then turned and took a few steps toward an alleyway before stopping to look back. It barked once more. "I think it wants us to follow," Emma said, opening her door. "Are you serious?" Nathan protested. "We're in the middle of an operation. And that dog might just lead us to something we'd otherwise miss," Emma countered, grabbing her flashlight and stepping out into the cold. With a resigned sigh, Nathan followed her. "If this leads to nowhere, you're explaining it to the boss." The dog, encouraged by their movement, bounded forward, pausing every so often to make sure they kept up. It led them down a narrow side street, the buildings on either side looming ominously. The air grew colder, the silence oppressive. Finally, the dog stopped in front of a boarded-up warehouse. Its barking echoed off the walls, loud and insistent. The agents exchanged a glance. "This place wasn't on the list," Nathan said, scanning the building. "Looks like it hasn't been used in years." "But something brought us here," Emma replied, her hand on her holstered gun. "Let's check it out." The dog darted through a gap in the boards covering the entrance, disappearing into the darkness. Nathan and Emma followed, their boots crunching on broken glass and debris. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and rust. Sunlight barely penetrated the grime-covered windows, leaving much of the space cloaked in shadow. Emma swept her flashlight across the room. "Empty," she muttered. "Maybe," Nathan said, his tone skeptical. His eyes narrowed as he noticed scuff marks on the dusty floor, leading toward a doorway on the far side of the warehouse. Or maybe not. The dog was waiting by the doorway, sitting patiently as if urging them to move faster. Emma crouched to inspect the marks. "Recent," she confirmed. "Someone's been through here." Drawing their weapons, the agents advanced. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. The metallic scent of blood hit them immediately, sharp and undeniable. "This just got serious," Nathan said, his voice low. The dog descended the stairs ahead of them, its paws barely making a sound. Emma and Nathan followed cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. At the bottom, they found themselves in a basement that seemed to stretch endlessly. The walls were lined with rusted pipes, and the floor was stained with dark, unidentifiable patches. In the center of the room was a man, tied to a chair. His head hung low, his body battered and bruised. The dog trotted over and sat at his feet, looking up at the agents expectantly. Emma rushed to the man's side, checking his pulse. "He's alive," she said, relief evident in her voice. But barely. Nathan scanned the room, his gun drawn. "We need backup," he said, pulling out his radio. "And an ambulance." As Emma worked to stabilize the man, a faint noise caught Nathan's attention. It was coming from above, the unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps. "Someone's here," Nathan whispered. "Stay with him." Emma nodded, her focus on the injured man. The dog, however, had other plans. It bolted toward the stairs, barking ferociously. "Damn it," Nathan muttered, chasing after it. He ascended the stairs quickly but silently, his weapon at the ready. Upstairs, the footsteps grew louder, more frantic. Nathan followed the sound to a side room filled with old machinery and crates. He saw a shadow dart between the stacks. "FBI. Stop where you are," he shouted, his voice echoing. The figure bolted, knocking over crates to block Nathan's path. He gave chase, weaving through the cluttered room. The dog was ahead of him, its barks guiding the pursuit. Back in the basement, Emma heard the commotion above. She hesitated, torn between staying with the injured man and helping her partner. The man groaned weakly, his head lolling to the side. "You're safe now," she said softly, though her own heart raced with unease. Grabbing her gun, she decided to follow, knowing Nathan might need her. When Emma reached the upper floor, she found Nathan holding a man at gunpoint. The suspect was thin, disheveled, and trembling. "I just work here," the man stammered. "I don't know anything." Before Nathan could respond, the dog growled, its hackles raised. Emma's eyes narrowed. "He's lying," she said. Suddenly, the sound of an engine roared outside. Emma rushed to the window just in time to see a black van speeding away. "There goes our real target," she said, frustration lacing her voice. Nathan cuffed the suspect and handed him off to Emma. "We'll deal with him later. Right now, we need to find out where that van is headed." The dog barked, standing by the door as if ready to lead them again. Emma looked at Nathan, a smirk tugging at her lips. "You still think following this dog was a waste of time?" Nathan sighed, holstering his gun. "Let's just see where he takes us next." The chase was far from over, and as the dog bounded ahead, the agents couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Shadows and whispers. The dog's tail wagged with renewed urgency as it bolted out the door, its paws barely making a sound on the cracked pavement. Agents Nathan Caldwell and Emma Harlow sprinted after it, their breaths forming clouds in the freezing Chicago air. The sun had begun its descent, painting the city in shades of gold and crimson, but the grim determination on their faces reflected anything but the beauty of the scene. The black van had disappeared down a labyrinth of alleys moments earlier, and the only lead they had now was the stray dog's unrelenting pursuit of something unseen. The dog darted left, then right, navigating the maze of old industrial streets with a precision that baffled the agents. "Does this dog have GPS or something?" Nathan huffed, struggling to keep up. "Maybe it's just smarter than us," Emma replied, her eyes fixed on the fleeting shadow ahead. They turned a corner and found themselves in a deserted courtyard. The dog had stopped, its ears perked and nose to the ground. It sniffed a trail leading toward a rusted chain-link fence. Beyond the fence lay a crumbling warehouse, its windows shattered and its walls marked with graffiti. The fading sunlight cast long, eerie shadows across the building, making it look like something out of a horror movie. "I've got a bad feeling about this," Nathan muttered, drawing his weapon. Emma nodded, her own gun at the ready. "Stay sharp." The dog squeezed through a gap in the fence, and the agents followed, their movements careful and deliberate. As they approached the warehouse, the dog barked once, a sharp sound that echoed off the walls. It then ran to a side door, its tail wagging furiously. Emma reached for the door handle, but Nathan stopped her. "Wait," he said, pointing to a faint red wire running along the doorframe. "Booby trap," Emma whispered, her heart racing. Looks like they were expecting company. Nathan knelt to inspect the wire. Basic trip mechanism. I can disarm it, but keep an eye out. If they've rigged the entrance, there's no telling what's inside. Emma scanned the area while Nathan worked. The dog sat nearby, its eyes fixed on the agents with an almost human intensity. Within minutes, Nathan had the trap disabled. He gave Emma a nod, and she pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the warehouse was a cavernous space filled with towering stacks of wooden crates. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and oil. Shafts of dim light from the broken windows created an uneven glow, casting unsettling shadows that danced with every step the agents took. "You hear that?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Nathan tilted his head, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing but the creak of the old building and the distant hum of the city. Then he heard it, faint, muffled voices coming from somewhere deeper inside. "Let's move," Nathan said, his grip tightening on his gun. The dog led the way, weaving through the maze of crates with the confidence of someone who knew the layout. The agents followed closely, their footsteps muffled by the dusty floor. As they advanced, the voices grew louder, more distinct. Nathan held up a hand, signaling Emma to stop. They crouched behind a stack of crates, peering around the corner. In the center of the warehouse, a group of 4 men stood around a table covered with maps and documents. 2 of them were armed with rifles slung over their shoulders, while the other 2 appeared to be in charge, gesturing animatedly at the table. A single bulb hung above them, casting harsh light on their faces. "They don't look like your average smugglers," Emma observed. Nathan nodded. "No. These guys are organized. Military, maybe. Look at their gear." Before they could discuss further, the dog barked again, startling the men. The armed guards immediately raised their weapons, scanning the shadows. Nathan and Emma ducked behind the crates, their hearts pounding. "Who's there?" one of the men barked, his voice sharp and commanding. The dog stepped into the light, its head low and tail wagging hesitantly. For a moment, the men relaxed, exchanging nervous chuckles. "It's just a stray," one of them said. "Keep an eye on it," another replied. "We can't take any chances." As the men turned their attention back to the table, Nathan and Emma used the distraction to reposition themselves. They crept along the perimeter of the room, moving closer to the group. Nathan signaled for Emma to cover him as he pulled out his radio. "Control, this is Agent Caldwell," he whispered. "We've got a situation. 4 suspects inside an abandoned warehouse at 1200 South Halsted. Requesting immediate backup. Possible connection to smuggling ring." "Roger that, Agent Caldwell," came the reply. "Backup is en route. ETA 10 minutes. Nathan nodded to Emma, who gave him a thumbs up. They had to hold their position until reinforcements arrived. But just as they settled in, the situation took an unexpected turn. The dog, which had been sitting quietly near the men, suddenly growled. Its fur bristled, and it bared its teeth. The men noticed immediately. "What's wrong with it?" one of them asked, his voice tinged with unease. Before anyone could react, the dog lunged at the table, knocking over a stack of papers. Chaos erupted as the men scrambled, shouting and cursing. The guards raised their rifles, unsure whether to shoot. "Now!" Nathan whispered. The agents sprang into action, guns drawn. "FBI! Drop your weapons and get on the ground!" Nathan shouted, his voice cutting through the commotion. The men froze for a split second before one of them bolted toward the far exit. Emma fired a warning shot, stopping him in his tracks. The armed guards hesitated, their fingers hovering over their triggers. "Don't be stupid," Nathan warned. "Put the guns down. Now." One by one, the men complied, dropping their weapons and raising their hands. The dog stood in the center of the room, its eyes fixed on the agents as if to say, "Good job." Emma moved in to cuff the suspects while Nathan covered her. As she secured the last man, the faint sound of sirens echoed in the distance. Backup was almost there. "Looks like we caught ourselves a big one," Nathan said, glancing at the table. The maps and documents were covered in coded messages and shipping routes, evidence that would blow the smuggling operation wide open. But before they could breathe a sigh of relief, a new sound filled the warehouse, the unmistakable rumble of an engine. Nathan turned just in time to see another black van burst through the side wall, its headlights cutting through the gloom. "Get down," he shouted, pulling Emma behind a crate as the van screeched to a halt. The side door slid open, and a group of masked men armed with automatic weapons jumped out, firing indiscriminately. The warehouse erupted into chaos once more, and the dog, caught in the crossfire, darted for cover. Nathan and Emma returned fire, their training kicking in as they worked to neutralize the new threat. The odds were against them, but they couldn't afford to back down. Somewhere in the melee, the dog reappeared, weaving through the chaos as if it had a plan of its own. And as the agents fought to hold their ground, they couldn't shake the feeling that this mysterious animal was more than just a stray, it was their unlikely ally in a fight they hadn't seen coming. The vanishing trail. The warehouse echoed with the chaos of gunfire as bullets ricocheted off metal crates and shattered what remained of the grimy windows. FBI agents Nathan Caldwell and Emma Harlow pressed themselves against a stack of crates, their weapons drawn as they exchanged fire with the masked gunmen who had stormed in moments earlier. The black van, now parked haphazardly in the center of the warehouse, sat like a foreboding monument to the smuggling operation they had uncovered. "We're pinned down here," Nathan shouted over the cacophony, his voice strained with urgency. "Backup better get here fast." Emma's jaw was set in determination as she fired off 2 calculated shots, forcing one of the assailants to duck behind cover. "If we don't neutralize them now, they'll scatter before help arrives." Their unlikely ally, the stray dog, was nowhere to be seen. The last they had glimpsed of it, the animal had darted toward the far end of the warehouse, weaving through the chaos like a ghost. Suddenly, the warehouse's emergency alarms blared to life. Red lights began flashing, painting the entire space in a hellish glow. Nathan stole a glance at Emma. "Did you trigger that?" She shook her head. "Not me." The distraction was enough for one of the gunmen to make a break for it. He sprinted toward the van, clutching a duffel bag. Nathan fired, hitting the man's leg. He crumpled to the ground with a scream, but another gunman was already helping him up. "They're trying to make a run for it," Nathan yelled. Before either agent could react, the dog reappeared, snarling as it leapt at the injured man. Its teeth sank into his arm, forcing him to drop the duffel bag. The masked man howled in pain, and the dog's attack threw the group into disarray. "Now's our chance," Emma said, darting forward with her weapon trained on the gunman. Nathan followed, covering her as she secured the duffel bag. The remaining gunman hesitated, clearly unnerved by the relentless attack from both agents and dog. Then, as if by some unspoken command, they retreated, jumping back into the van. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle sped off, leaving behind a trail of burnt rubber and shattered glass. Emma holstered her weapon and crouched to examine the duffel bag. Let's see what they were so desperate to protect. Inside were bundles of cash, fake passports, and a small black ledger. Emma flipped through the pages, her brow furrowing. This isn't just smuggling. This is a ledger of transactions, people, locations, shipments. This could be huge, Nathan. Nathan nodded, still scanning the room for any lingering threats. We need to get this back to the office and run it through analysis. But first, let's find that dog. The dog had vanished once more, leaving only a trail of bloody paw prints leading toward a back exit. Nathan and Emma followed cautiously, their nerves still on edge. The trail led them out of the warehouse and into an overgrown alley that reeked of decay. Where is it taking us now? Nathan wondered aloud, his voice tinged with frustration. I don't know, Emma replied, her flashlight cutting through the gathering darkness. But something tells me this isn't over yet. The trail ended abruptly at a storm drain. The agents exchanged a puzzled glance before crouching to inspect the opening. The metal grate had been pried loose, revealing a dark tunnel leading underground. "You've got to be kidding me," Nathan said, shaking his head. "It went down there." Emma's gaze was steely. "We've come this far. We can't stop now." With a resigned sigh, Nathan climbed into the tunnel, his flashlight illuminating the narrow passage. Emma followed close behind, her weapon at the ready. The air was damp and foul, the walls slick with grime. The sound of dripping water echoed ominously around them. After crawling for what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened up into a larger chamber. It was an old maintenance room, long forgotten and covered in layers of dust and mold. In the center of the room stood the dog, its fur matted and its eyes glowing eerily in the flashlight beams. But the dog wasn't alone. A group of children huddled in the corner, their faces pale and gaunt. They looked no older than 10 or 11, their clothes tattered and their eyes filled with fear. The dog sat protectively in front of them, growling softly as the agents approached. "It's okay," Emma said gently, lowering her weapon. "We're here to help." One of the children, a girl with curly hair and tear-streaked cheeks, stepped forward hesitantly. "The bad men, they brought us here. They said they'd hurt us if we tried to leave." Nathan's jaw clenched. "You're safe now. We're FBI. No one's going to hurt you anymore." The dog's growl subsided, and it lay down as if sensing the danger had passed. Emma quickly radioed for additional units, providing their location and the number of children they had found. As they waited for backup, Nathan crouched beside the dog, his expression softening. "You led us here, didn't you?" he said, scratching behind its ears. The dog's tail wagged weakly, its exhaustion evident. "This dog, it's more than just a stray," Emma said, her voice filled with wonder. "It knew exactly where to go, like it's been waiting for someone to follow it." The sound of sirens grew louder, and moments later, a team of FBI agents and paramedics flooded the tunnel. The children were ushered out one by one, their relief palpable as they were wrapped in blankets and guided to safety. Nathan and Emma lingered for a moment, watching as the dog sat silently, its job seemingly complete. Nathan crouched down again, meeting the dog's eyes. "You're coming with us," he said firmly. "No way we're letting you go back out there alone." The dog tilted its head, as if considering the offer, before wagging its tail and following the agents out of the tunnel. As they emerged into the cold night air, Nathan looked at Emma. "This case just got a lot bigger. Whoever's behind this isn't going to stop because we saved a few kids." Emma nodded. "But we've got a new partner now," she said, glancing at the dog. "And I have a feeling it's not done helping us yet." Into the web. The night stretched cold and unforgiving as FBI agents Nathan Caldwell and Emma Harlow drove back to headquarters. The rescued children were safe in the hands of social services, but their stories weighed heavily on the agents. Each child had recounted fragments of a larger nightmare: abductions, transport in dark vans, and whispered threats of being sold to unseen buyers. In the back seat, the stray dog sat quietly, its weary eyes fixed on the road ahead. Nathan glanced at it through the rearview mirror, his thoughts racing. "This dog," he said, breaking the silence. "It's not just smart. It's like it knew exactly where to lead us." Emma nodded, her fingers drumming on the file in her lap. The ledger they had recovered from the warehouse was filled with cryptic codes and initials. Deciphering it would take time, but one entry stood out: a transaction scheduled for the following night at a location ominously labeled, the auction. "Whoever's behind this is operating on a massive scale," Emma said. "That ledger's just the tip of the iceberg. We need to move fast before they realize we've got it." Nathan gripped the steering wheel tighter. "They left a lot of loose ends at that warehouse. We have a chance to hit them hard." Let's not waste it. The dog let out a low whine, as if echoing their urgency. Emma turned to it, a faint smile breaking through her grim expression. Don't worry. We'll finish what you started. Back at FBI headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. Analysts pored over the ledger, mapping connections and decoding its secrets. Emma and Nathan sat in the conference room, surrounded by screens displaying maps, photos, and reports. The dog lay at Emma's feet, its presence strangely comforting amid the chaos. "All right," said Special Agent in Charge Denise Halstead, striding into the room. Her no-nonsense demeanor instantly commanded attention. "Here's what we know. That ledger details a trafficking operation spanning multiple states. The entry labeled, 'The Auction,' is scheduled for tomorrow night at an abandoned hotel outside the city. If we're lucky, we can intercept them before they disappear underground again." Nathan leaned forward. "What's our plan?" Denise gestured to the screens. "We'll coordinate a multi-agency raid. SWAT will handle the takedown, while undercover agents infiltrate the site to gather intel before the operation kicks off." She paused, her sharp eyes narrowing. "And Nathan, Emma, you two are leading the advance team. Your dog seems to have a knack for finding things we'd miss. Bring it." Emma exchanged a glance with Nathan, then nodded. "Understood." The abandoned hotel loomed in the distance, a skeletal structure silhouetted against the cloudy night sky. Emma adjusted her earpiece as their unmarked van rolled to a stop a few blocks away. The surrounding area was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that made the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. The dog hopped out of the van, its ears perked and its nose to the ground. Nathan knelt beside it, attaching a small tracking device to its collar. "All right, buddy," he murmured. "Time to show us what you can do." Emma scanned the area with her binoculars. "There's movement near the north entrance," she reported. "Looks like they've got guards posted. Armed." Nathan nodded, his jaw set. "Let's stick to the plan. We get in, gather intel, and signal SWAT when it's time to move." The dog led the way, weaving through shadows with an uncanny sense of purpose. Nathan and Emma followed closely, their steps silent on the cracked pavement. As they approached the building, the low murmur of voices reached their ears. Peering around a corner, they saw two guards stationed at the entrance, rifles slung across their chests. Emma tapped Nathan's shoulder and pointed to a fire escape on the side of the building. He nodded, and they moved swiftly, climbing the rusted ladder with practiced ease. The dog waited below, its gaze fixed on them like a sentinel. From their vantage point on the second floor, the agents had a clear view of the operation below. The main hall was dimly lit, but they could make out a makeshift stage surrounded by folding chairs. Men in suits and women in expensive dresses milled about, their faces hidden behind elaborate masks. On the stage, a row of frightened individuals stood silently, their hands bound and their eyes filled with despair. "It's an auction," Emma whispered, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. "They're selling people like cattle." Nathan's expression hardened. "We've seen enough. Let's call it in." He reached for his radio, but before he could speak, a commotion erupted below. The dog had entered the hall, barking furiously as it darted between the legs of the masked attendees. Chaos ensued as people screamed and stumbled, the guards struggling to restore order. "Damn it," Nathan muttered. "Our cover's blown. We need to move now." Emma activated her radio. "SWAT, this is Agent Harlow. The situation's escalated. Move in now." The sound of shattering glass and heavy boots echoed through the building as SWAT teams breached the entrances. Nathan and Emma descended the fire escape, joining the chaos on the ground floor. Gunfire erupted as the guards opened fire, but the tactical teams quickly overpowered them. Nathan spotted one of the masked ringleaders attempting to flee through a side door. He gave chase, tackling the man to the ground and ripping off his mask. The man's face was pale and sweating, his eyes wide with fear. "It's over," Nathan growled. "Tell us everything." Meanwhile, Emma worked to free the captives on the stage. The dog stood beside her, its presence calming the frightened individuals as she cut their bindings. By the time the dust settled, dozens of suspects were in custody, and the victims were being escorted to safety. Nathan and Emma regrouped outside, their breaths visible in the cold night air. Denise approached, her expression one of grim satisfaction. "Good work. This operation's been a long time coming. Thanks to you two, we've dismantled a major piece of their network." Emma glanced at the dog, which sat proudly at her side. "We couldn't have done it without our new partner." Denise smirked. "Well, I hope you're ready to make it official. That dog's earned its place in the field." As the agents loaded into the van, the dog jumped in after them, curling up on the seat between Nathan and Emma. For the first time that night, a sense of hope flickered amidst the darkness. But they all knew this was only the beginning. The ledger hinted at a network far larger than the one they had just taken down. And as long as there were people willing to exploit others, the fight was far from over. The network unravels. The atmosphere in the FBI headquarters the following morning was electric. The raid on the abandoned hotel had been a massive success, nearly 30 suspects arrested, dozens of victims rescued, and a treasure trove of evidence collected. The ledger, with its coded entries, was proving to be the key to unraveling a far-reaching trafficking network. Nathan Caldwell sat at his desk, his eyes scanning a digital map projected on the wall. Each red dot represented a location linked to the operation. Lines connected them like a sinister web stretching across multiple states. "This is bigger than we thought," he muttered. Emma Harlow walked in, a fresh cup of coffee in her hand and the stray dog, now affectionately named Shadow, trotting by her side. Shadow had become an unofficial member of the team overnight, earning admirers throughout the office. "You're telling me," Emma said, placing the coffee on Nathan's desk. "The analysts are saying this might be one of the largest trafficking operations ever uncovered. They've identified over 50 additional sites based on the ledger, and that's just the start." Nathan leaned back, rubbing his temples. 50 sites. That means hundreds, maybe thousands, of victims. Emma sat down across from him, her expression grim. "And we only have a small window before the remaining locations go dark. The people running this know we're onto them. We have to move fast." Just then, Special Agent in Charge Denise Halstead entered the room, a folder in her hand. "Team, we've got our next target," she announced. "A warehouse on the outskirts of St. Louis. According to the ledger, it's a central hub for their operations. If we take it out, we cut off a significant portion of their network." Nathan straightened. "What's the plan?" Denise opened the folder, revealing blueprints of the warehouse. "SWAT will handle the main entry, but we need eyes on the ground before they move in. That means you two and Shadow. We need to know what we're walking into." Emma glanced at Shadow, who seemed to perk up at the mention of action. "Looks like you're up for another mission," she said, scratching behind the dog's ears. Shadow wagged his tail in response. By nightfall, Nathan, Emma, and Shadow were positioned on a hill overlooking the warehouse. The facility was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Floodlights illuminated the area, casting long shadows across the yard. Nathan adjusted his binoculars. "They've got at least 6 guards outside. Who knows how many more inside?" Emma was lying prone beside him, her rifle equipped with a high-powered scope. "Looks like they've fortified the place pretty well. This isn't going to be a simple raid." Shadow sniffed the air, his ears twitching. He let out a low growl, alerting the agents to movement near the rear of the warehouse. A delivery truck pulled up, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The guards opened the gate, allowing it to enter. "That truck could be carrying anything," Nathan said. "We need to get closer." Emma nodded. I'll cover you from here. Take Shadow with you. Nathan and Shadow moved down the hill, sticking to the shadows as they approached the fence. Shadow's keen senses guided Nathan past the patrols, the dog stopping whenever a guard came too close. They reached a blind spot near the fence, and Nathan cut through the chain links with a pair of wire cutters. Once inside, Shadow led Nathan toward the loading dock. The truck was parked, its back doors open. Nathan peered inside and felt his stomach turn. Crates filled with weapons and unmarked boxes, likely containing forged documents and other contraband, lined the interior. They're not just trafficking people, Nathan muttered. They're arming criminal organizations. He snapped a few photos with his phone before signaling Shadow to follow him. They moved toward the main building, slipping inside through a side door. The interior was a hive of activity. Men and women sorted through crates, their movements quick and methodical. At the center of it all was a man in a tailored suit, barking orders. Nathan activated his earpiece. "Harlow, we've got a situation. This isn't just a hub for trafficking. It's an armory. SWAT needs to be ready for heavy resistance." "Copy that," Emma replied. "I've got eyes on the guards outside. They're on high alert. Whatever you're doing, make it quick." Shadow suddenly growled, his gaze fixed on a corner of the room. Nathan followed the dog's line of sight and saw a small group of people, bound and gagged, being led toward a back room. He clenched his jaw, his fists tightening around his weapon. "Not on my watch," he whispered. Nathan moved swiftly, using the stacks of crates as cover. Shadow stayed close, his movements silent and precise. When the captors reached the door, Nathan sprang into action. "FBI! Drop your weapons," he shouted, his voice echoing through the warehouse. The captors froze, but one of them reached for his gun. Shadow lunged, knocking the man to the ground and holding him there with a fierce growl. Nathan fired a warning shot, forcing the others to surrender. The commotion drew the attention of the workers in the warehouse. Chaos erupted as they scattered, some reaching for weapons while others tried to flee. Nathan grabbed his radio. "Harlow, it's go time. Get SWAT in here now." Outside, Emma relayed the command. Moments later, the sound of sirens filled the air, followed by the thunderous breach of the SWAT team storming the facility. Gunfire erupted as the guards attempted to hold their ground, but they were no match for the highly trained agents. Inside, Nathan freed the captives, guiding them to safety. Shadow stayed by his side, snarling at anyone who dared to come too close. By the time SWAT had secured the warehouse, dozens of suspects were in custody, and the victims were on their way to safety. Hours later, back at headquarters, Nathan and Emma sat in the conference room, exhausted but triumphant. The evidence collected from the warehouse was staggering: weapons, documents, and digital records that would cripple the trafficking network. Shadow lay at Nathan's feet, his eyes half closed. Denise entered the room, her expression one of pride. "You two just delivered the biggest blow to this operation yet," she said. "This will send shockwaves through their entire network." Emma smiled faintly. "We couldn't have done it without Shadow. He's been our secret weapon." Denise crouched to scratch behind the dog's ears. "Well, Shadow, welcome to the FBI. You've earned it." As Nathan looked at the map on the wall, now dotted with green to signify the dismantled sites, he felt a surge of determination. "This isn't over," he said. "But tonight, we made a difference." Emma nodded, her hand resting on Shadow's head. "And tomorrow, we keep going." The final piece. The hum of activity at FBI headquarters reached a fever pitch. Screens flickered with live feeds, maps, and profiles of suspects as analysts pieced together the final fragments of the sprawling trafficking network. Nathan Caldwell and Emma Harlow stood in the command center, their eyes glued to a large screen displaying a diagram of interconnected names, locations, and aliases. Shadow, the stray-turned FBI hero, sat at Nathan's feet, his ears perked. The dog's quiet presence had become a source of comfort for the team, a reminder of the humanity at the heart of their mission. "We've identified their leader," said Denise Halstead, stepping forward. She pointed to a photo on the screen, a man with sharp features and cold eyes. "Marcus Lang. He's the mastermind behind the entire operation. We've traced him to an estate on the outskirts of Denver. According to intel, he's planning to flee the country tonight." Emma's eyes narrowed. "What's our window?" Denise crossed her arms. "We have 6 hours before his private jet is scheduled to depart. This is our last chance to take him down and dismantle what's left of his network." Nathan adjusted his vest, his jaw set. "What's the plan?" Denise brought up a blueprint of the estate. "SWAT will secure the perimeter. Your team will infiltrate the mansion and capture Lang. He'll have guards, but they won't expect us to move this fast." Emma glanced at Shadow. "And what about our star player?" Denise smiled faintly. "Shadow goes with you. He's proven himself more than capable." The estate was a fortress. High walls surrounded the sprawling mansion, and surveillance cameras dotted every corner. Nathan, Emma, and Shadow crouched in the shadows just outside the main gate, watching as the SWAT team disabled the security system. "We're clear," came the voice of the SWAT commander over the radio. "Move in." Nathan and Emma slipped through the gate, their movements silent and precise. Shadow padded alongside them, his ears twitching at every sound. They navigated the manicured grounds, staying low as they approached the mansion. Inside, the opulence was overwhelming. Chandeliers hung from the ceilings, and expensive artwork adorned the walls. But the agents weren't here to admire the decor. They moved quickly, clearing room after room. Shadow's nose worked overtime, sniffing out any sign of Lang or his guards. A sudden growl from Shadow stopped Nathan in his tracks. The dog's body tensed, his gaze fixed on a door at the end of the hallway. Emma raised her weapon, nodding to Nathan. Nathan slowly turned the handle, pushing the door open to reveal a grand study. Marcus Lang sat behind a massive desk, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos outside. 2 armed guards flanked him, their weapons trained on the agents. "FBI," Nathan said, his voice steady. "It's over, Lang. Put your hands where we can see them." Lang smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You've done well to get this far. But you're too late. My escape plan is already in motion." The guards raised their weapons, but before they could fire, Shadow sprang into action. The dog lunged at the nearest guard, knocking him off balance and causing his weapon to discharge harmlessly into the ceiling. Emma took advantage of the distraction, firing a precise shot that disarmed the second guard. Nathan moved swiftly, pinning Lang against the desk and securing him in handcuffs. Lang struggled, but Nathan's grip was ironclad. "You're not going anywhere," Nathan growled. The room fell silent, the tension evaporating as the SWAT team stormed in to secure the scene. Emma knelt beside Shadow, checking him for injuries. The dog's tail wagged, his eyes bright with adrenaline. "Good job, boy," she said, scratching behind his ears. "You've earned a steak dinner." Back at headquarters, the celebration was subdued but heartfelt. The operation had been a resounding success. Lang's capture marked the end of a years-long investigation, and his arrest would lead to the collapse of his entire network. Nathan and Emma sat in the break room, exhaustion etched on their faces. Shadow lay at their feet, chewing on a bone someone had brought him as a reward. Denise entered, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "To the best team I've ever had," she said, handing them each a glass. Nathan raised his glass. "To Shadow. The real hero." Emma laughed. "Agreed." As they clinked glasses, Shadow let out a contented sigh, his job finally done. For the first time in weeks, the agents allowed themselves to relax, knowing they had made a difference. The fight wasn't over, it never was, but tonight, they had one. And Shadow, the stray who had walked into their lives with a mission, was now a permanent part of the FBI family.